vengeance!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the way to sprinklers on, alright. Well,
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits radio program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we break down the past week in racing and preview next week. Before I do that, allow me to introduce you to the panel I have assembled tonight. With me, as always, Mr. Gray Warren and Mr. Richard Youden. Fellas, how you doing tonight?
Doing great.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a light panel tonight. A lot of folks are off assignment. Seth's getting ready to cover the NASCAR chase. Joey's on his way out to Sonoma to cover the IndyCar finale. But the three of us are here in the studio to talk about racing. And so knock out the headline real quick. NASCAR has set their chase field. It was Brad Keselowski winning at the Brickyard there. A bit of a strategy play. Well-earned win, I thought. I thought one of the cutest and precious things there was at the end of the day when they're all lined up to kiss the bricks, Brad's young daughter refusing to kiss the bricks, making little yucky faces. But I thought it was really neat. It's always neat to see the human side of those races there, him enjoying that moment with his young family. So, but looking at Chase Field there were no big surprises come out of Indianapolis when it comes to the Chase Field, but Kyle Busch won the regular season championship. He'll be the other 15 drivers in the chase are as follows in this order: Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Clinton Boyer, Joey Logano, Kurt Busch, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, Eric Jones, Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Eric Embla, Jimmy Johnson, and Alex Bowman. So that's our grid for the chase, and we'll begin in Vegas in a week's time, this coming weekend. With the chase there. So, Gray, impressions on the Brickyard there? A big day for Roger Penske, who's got a bunch of Indy 5 trophies, but this is his first Brickyard.
It sure was. He finally got the Brickyard 400 trophy to go along with 17 Indy 500s and 17 Indy 500 poles, and I think he's won the last 4 Indy Grand Prix. So, his team is definitely the masters of Indianapolis Motor Speedway for sure. But good play at the end. Cautions came out, and the way they fell, Keselowski had fresher tires there at the end and positioned himself to take advantage of that last caution and was able to run down Denny Hamlin and make the pass for the win. Lost for Hamlin. Hamlin had probably one of the better cars. He, along with Clint Boyer, during most of the racing, and also Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch had strong runs as well. But that's two weeks so that the two has been able to capitalize and win races. And I think averages probably they've lost a few during the course of the year along those lines too when they things have not gone right for them. But showing a little bit more speed at the end of the season, the Penske team has. So we'll see how that translates. Gives them a little bit of momentum going into the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there. Also, we had a pretty interesting NASCAR Xfinity race on Saturday. Allgaier ended up winning that race in a very exciting race, I thought, with the aero package that the Xfinity cars have there. I think the first stage Allgaier come off fourth turn, leading it, and ended up finishing fourth, as they had a four abreast finish for the end of stage one. So yeah, that package really seems to work well with those cars up there, and made it a very exciting Xfinity race there. But Allgaier gets his fifth win of the year, and he's positioning himself to win the Xfinity regular season championship. And I think they've got one more race before they go into their playoffs. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that, but
if Seth was here, he would.
Yes, yeah.
So,
but yeah, they're getting ready for their playoff too. So yeah, and that sets Allgaier up really well for that. But going back to the Brickyard 400, it was an unusual weekend. The cars reported up there. The Xfinity cars came in on Friday. The Cup cars came in Friday night, and only we're going to have 2 days of activity there, Saturday and Sunday. But rain moved in on Friday and washed out activity for both divisions at the track for all weekend. So they went into their Monday doubleheader with no practice and no qualifying. So it was kind of cold turkey for all those guys on the grid on Monday. But disappointing for the fans. Brickyard's a big event for NASCAR. It's one of the majors that we look forward to going to each year. And I hated that foul weather again for everybody. But good wins for the two. That's two majors in a row, back-to-back, Southern 500 and Brickyard 400.
And that's two races that hadn't won before. I mean, that's two more lines on his resume to put in there. So
exactly, like I said, two major races. So win.
Yeah, and it puts them like you mentioned, the momentum. You know, they're definitely peaking at the right times, and we've seen Jimmy Johnson in the past, and so this could be a pretty good playoff season for Brad and the entire Penske team. I did over the course of the season. Had some comments about last season, which even as I watch it, I have a feeling Brad may have caught him by the end of the race anyway. Without the caution, he was running about 7:10. The fact that they had the caution laps allowed Brad to have shorter distance to make up, and then the fresh tire advantage goes away rather quickly, so he had fewer laps till the end of the race, which was a comment about meaningless cars causing a caution at the end of the race, right? Which he took a little heat for that, but Denny's kind of always been one to speak his mind there. But about the meaningless cars, that meaningless cars comment, it kind of put the spotlight on what is a flaw with the chase. Call it the playoff because they want to associate themselves, or they want to kind of find differences. The stick and ball, that's hard to say, right? The stick and ball sports, if you don't make the playoffs, you go home. Guy from the Cleveland Browns field and intercepts them, but certainly somebody could lose this car, causes a caution or has an incident with one of the leaders. So it's there's no fix up at home with four cars in.
It doesn't matter if you're running a 10-race playoff format or you run the whole 36 events of the 36. That's part of it. It always has been and always will. Like I said, it's just Denny blowing off a little bit of steam and a little bit of, he was disgusted and disappointed after the race. But, those cars have every bit as much right out to the track as he does, and he may be racing for first place, but they're racing for their position on the track just as hard as he's racing for his position. Yeah, it comes down to it's first sport, and you're always looking out for yourself and nobody else. And that's the nature of the business, But no big deal there. I mean, he'll move on and go on, but like I said, it's just part of the game.
Now, Richard, did you get a chance to watch the Monday edition of the Brickyard?
Unfortunately, some of us were working. Unfortunately, on Monday. But
I have the benefit of giant big screens at work. Big screens at work. So
yeah, I could try, but I don't think I get on very well if I did that. But no, I did catch bits of it, and that's sort of the perfect race for Keselowski, isn't it? I mean, it just plays into his hands. That sort of strategy sort of. Run there, get on the that late race caution played into his hands perfectly, and you wonder how many he'd been like the dominant car all weekend, There's so often that I don't say he gets undeserved wins, but he sort of gets these wins through just playing the game and being smart. I think he's got to take a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, he's an accomplished racer, no doubt about it. He and his team together. His crew chief is very astute, and yeah, you're right, Richard. They have won a lot of races that way, either working the fuel mileage strategy or tire strategy. Down through his career. So yeah, they've been very successful at that. And I mean, you would expect that from the Penske organization too. They're deep in talent. For sure.
And I mean, I remember when we were sort of at RCR, when we'd watch the strategy during the race and watch what other teams were doing. The 2-car was always the one you looked at and tried to, work out. As I say, they had the ability, to take a car that certainly wasn't the fastest car in the grid and go out and get the job done, which was, fair credit to them.
Right, and then not afraid to gamble when it comes down to it, not off grip, so to speak, win these races. Seen that multiple times over the last several years. But that's got to be big for Roger. Getting that other win there to go along with all those Indy 500 trophies he's got and Indy Grand Prix trophies. So yeah, he can definitely crown himself the king of Indy, no doubt about that.
Not that at all, yeah. So, but let's take a look at this chase field. We've got some really strong competitors in this chase field. Obviously, you've got your big three. Kurt and Kevin and Martin are strong. We're going into Vegas, which falls right into the wheelhouse of all three of those guys there. Vegas has not been a strong track for Keselowski, but you got Clint Boyer as that flashes of brilliance all year long. Kyle Larson seems ready to break out at any time. So, but then you got guys there at the bottom of there who are barely holding on. Alex Bowman, good job for him getting in his first first full season, but he really hasn't been stunning all year. Jimmy Johnson, again, just is kind of been really mired in mediocrity, but it was good enough for a spot in there. Eric Jones has been good at times. He won a race, but I don't know how far he's going to go in there. But if you had to look at this, and other than these top guys, and say there's a dark horse in there who may be able to just kind of surprise us and win it all, who do you guys look to?
Well, I look at the two. I mean, the two. He's come on strong with 2 wins at the end of the year. They've been consistent. I mean, he was solidly going to be in the playoffs, regardless if he won these last 2 or not. This just kind of, got it. And really the big thing for him was accumulating those playoff points. I think Brad's accumulated some stage wins throughout the year. So he's got playoff points in the bank to go into this. I think, if you look, obviously we pretty much discount that the big three that we've called them all year will be there. Really, we're looking at who might come in and fill that 4th place. And I see no reason that Keselowski couldn't come in and do that.
Right. So, but beyond Keselowski, because I was kind of putting him in there of the non-dark horse. I mean, you got to look at a guy like Denny Hamlin, who's been pretty quick all year long,
sure.
and a couple of well-timed wins during the playoffs, and he could really steal this thing, And again,
I want to
go ahead, Richard.
Name out there, Eric Almirola.
Yeah. Then, and then I look at guys like Chase Elliott too, because Chase, he's got that first win, and he runs consistently near the front every week. He could be a spoiler. And, you talk about stick and ball sports, and in some ways, this 10 race deal is not unlike a tournament that we're going to, and a team can get hot and roll through the tournament and come away with the championship. So that's, we could see someone get hot and do it. We saw Tony Stewart do that several years ago. Tony qualified for the chase, which it was called at that time, kind of late in the season, and then once we got into chase, he reeled off 5 wins and stole the championship.
Has anybody ever won the Cup Series without a win?
I don't know. I know.
No,
that,
I think it was Kansas had one win, right?
Kansas did it with one. Yeah, he did it with one win. But I do not think in in modern times we've never had anyone. I think that's probably the only time. I know that's happened in the Xfinity Series because Austin Dillon won it may have been the Nationwide Series then, but Austin Dillon won that championship several years ago without a win. He was of course, that was the first year they put the new rules in place where the Cup guys, you had to declare what series that you were running for the championship in, and the Cup guys' wins were negated, in that series, and it ended up Austin won that on accumulating points that year. I forget when that was. It may have been
14, wasn't it, or 13?
Yeah, it might have been somewhere along in there. He won the championship via that route. So yeah,
because it could be interesting. One of those guys, especially with the way the playoffs work, some of the top guys have a little bit of bad luck throughout the season. So I mean, hypothetically, Harvick and Busch and Truex all get knocked out in the first round by some capitulation. Yeah. Then they can go win the remaining half dozen races.
Yeah,
and
it would really
Hamlin or an Almirola or somebody like, or even a Jimmy Johnson can just sort of plod along and get a few top fives and the top threes here and there, and come Homestead they can finish third or fourth and still win the championship.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It really takes some really extraordinary circumstances for that to happen, because you'd have to go, you go into Homestead and to do that, it would be, there'd be some extraordinary circumstances in multiple places that would allow someone to do that.
Sure, but hey.
But it could happen, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, we all know. Right. We all know how that normally works out, don't we?
That's right.
Yeah, it's all mathematically possible. I mean, every racing. I think every racing series is actually mathematically possible to win the championship without a win, but it's just very, very difficult because there's an advantage to winning, which is why race drivers like to win races. So.
And you throw in those bonus points that these guys have accumulated, over the season too. So all that comes into play as well. But looking forward to looking forward to Vegas that we're going to this weekend. You said at the start of the show that it's it really plays into the hands of the big three. These intermediate tracks have been in their wheelhouse all year long. So no reason to think that those guys aren't going to be the favorites going into to Vegas this weekend.
You wonder, we discussed it all last week at some length, but with the 78 shutting down next season, you wonder how much resource they're going to put in between now and the end of the season, or if they're pretty much just on a park and ride sort of system now, just get through the end of the season.
I think that these guys have it, they're going to put their best foot forward. I think that they know this is their swan song. We do think of them as a little bit lame duck, but I think because this is their go out on top and go. They're going to be one. Obviously, they're going into this deal as one of the favorites. They know how to do it. They did it last year. Like I said, they can get hot too. I think too. They're fighting with their emotions. Obviously, and you don't know if they're going to interfere in what they're doing. You would hope that these guys would just say, okay, we already know what's going to happen. There's no suspense is over. They know the team is going to be disbanded at the end of the year, so they know that's going to happen. So there's no surprises there. So they can go one of two ways. They can suck it up, and these guys are going to find jobs. They'll be. The vast majority of them will be well sought after. They're in a good place. From that professionally, they're in a good place. If they can just set all emotions aside and go, they can be successful. They haven't been as strong overall as they were last year. Obviously, the 18 and the 4 have had something to say about that. But still, they have dominated races in the same fashion they did last year at times this year. So I look for them to go out. And they fell out of the Brickyard 400 early. They were the first car out, but they had a brake failure. But I'm thinking that other teams suffered brake failure there too. I think that was just a bad choice in the brake package they used there. Several other teams had some brake issues there, not unlike what we see at Poe from time to time. So I think they can write that off and move forward.
Yeah, I don't see them putting any less effort into with a cup on the line there. I mean, still. Yeah, I mean, there's still a big paycheck at the end of the chase, to win compared to just phoning it in. And you know what?
Yeah.
If you're walking away from the sport, wouldn't you like to walk away with a pocket full of money?
Sure.
Knowing that you have the opportunity to do that,
Well,
and your futures. I think one of those guys is as good as they were last year. So that's just my thought.
Well, obviously, we hear all the rumors of where Cole Pern and Truex are going to go. Obviously, I think it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to end up at Joe Gibbs, and I'm sure that Cole Pern will be bringing some of his guys along with him to fill roles there, and I'm sure they'll be welcomed to come in there. I mean, it's an all or nothing type of proposition, and why wouldn't you? I mean, if you can get those guys in a turnkey package, why wouldn't you accept them and bring them into your organization and set them up in equipment and say, hey guys, here it is, go do it. And I think they would. But one of the things that's kind of perplexed me this week is, everybody is preaching all the gloom and doom about NASCAR all year long, about attendance being down and TV ratings being down and all that, and they want to tie this to the 78 team going out of business. And I think that part of the equation is a little overblown. I think that, sure, it's got problems, but I don't think that is totally what's led to the demise of the 78. We talked about this last week. I think there's a lot more at play than what the mass media wants people to believe, that this is a byproduct of NASCAR somewhat decline. But I think there's a lot of things going on. We talked about Martin Truex's contract being up for renewal at the end of the year, Toyota's contract being up for renewal at the end of the year. There's other things that have come to light lately, that their alliance fees from Joe Gibbs were going up, and that Barney Visser had put a lot of his own money into this thing. Now, obviously, they did lose 5 Hour Energy, and that was one of their main sponsors. But a championship team like that could replace 5 Hour Energy with one or more sponsors to take up that gap. I just think that along with family pressures that are coming toward Barney Visser for having to invest so much of his money and his family's money into this operation, it just comes a time that you look at the big picture and look at your return on investment, and you see this may be the time to get out. He came in, he did what he wanted to do, he proved he could run a single car team 1,000 miles away from the hub of stock car racing. He could win races and to prove, and I think he looked at the thing and decided that this would be the best time to get out.
Yeah, and I think you still need to remember that even though they did win the championship and they are prolific winners on the circuit, they're still a rather small compared to the juggernaut teams out there. And so the fact that Barney Visser has decided to close up shop is not indicative of the sport being in trouble. I mean, now if you go back to the kart days when you saw Penske, Ganassi, Fernandez, and Andretti all leave the kart series to join the IRL, then you knew kart was in trouble.
Yeah.
But this is, I don't want to downplay their significance, but it's not as if that, that Hendricks is closing shop or Penske's moving elsewhere. Yeah. It's still a smaller team. It's a football small team, but I don't think it's taken over the overall health of the sport, to your point, Gray.
Yeah, and Richard can speak to this too, and we talked about this. Richard knows what they were up against from an engineering standpoint, having to to fight and compete, even though they were an alliance team. But Richard can speak to what they had to go through to compete with the big boys.
Yeah, and in a way, this is going to sound a bit sort of opposite of what we've just been talking about. In a way, they probably had it. I don't want to use the word slightly easier because that's wrong. But they were certainly at an advantage, and I think when they were an alliance of RCR, I saw that, because they won Pocono in 15. They may have won 2 races in 15. I can't remember now. But what they were typically doing was they would obviously take all the R&D that RCR was doing, or in the last few years Joe Gibbs was doing, and you manipulate that and sort of massage it a little bit and just make it better. They poured their resources into the, for want of a better word, the fluffing and buffing of the cars, whereas the main manufacturers, the Gibbs, the Hendricks, the RCRs, they would spend all their resources just getting the thing out the door, and then Furniture Row could come along and say, oh well, we're just gonna, they had the budget of. They had the biggest budget of any alliance team in NASCAR, and they probably had a bigger budget of some of the non-alliance teams in NASCAR. They had a considerable budget, which I think probably has a lot to do with the fact that they're pulling out. So they could spend a lot of time, working on parts and modifying them and getting the optimum out of it. I mean, I remember, without going into too many details, RCR, we'd get a car back from Furniture Row and we didn't recognise half the parts on the time we got it back, So it's a little bit of a strange situation that they went through. And I think they're a victim of just spending too much money. As we said, I don't think it's indicative of what sport is in 2018. I think it's just they've bitten off more than they can chew, and when the sponsorship gets a little...
That's the point I was trying to make, that they invested a lot of their own money, more than they probably intended, into this operation, because obviously, like you said, they could take things and kind of cherry pick what they want to do, and in a lot of cases, they would make some improvements. And one of the guys, when one of my friends at Joe Gibbs, when they first went on with them, he was going to be more workload on them. And I told him at that time, I said, "You'll be surprised. You'll benefit as much from that alliance from them as they will from you." So yeah, and that proved to be a fact that but you look at the overall record on that team, that little small team. They've won so far 17 races in the Cup Series and a championship. So yeah, and even in what's going to become a brief history, that will be a pretty good resume.
Absolutely. So before the IndyCar Championship and Formula One news that we have as well, let's go ahead and preview Vegas for a second, and pick up some winners for Vegas. So, Richard, who do you like for Vegas?
Whoa, let's make it interesting. Let's go Joe Logano.
Okay, all right, and Gray.
I'm going to pick the guy we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes. I'm going to pick the 78 team is going to rebound from a disappointing Brickyard 400, a disappointing Darlington, and claim the race at Vegas. Firing off.
All right, then I'll take Kyle Busch and say that he threw down the gauntlet. He doesn't want to be the first guy to win the regular season championship and not take it all the way to the Cup. So, you remember last year when Martin was presented the regular season trophy, and he had a bad day at Richmond.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he was just, it just seems kind of hollow. And then the thing with Kyle, he had a pretty rough day at Indianapolis. Didn't work out the way he wanted to, but then and I don't know what accolades will come with that in the future. It's like I watched the end of the race at a bar. I had left work and went to a local watering hole to watch the end of the race, and there were a couple guys.
Traitor.
Huh?
Traitor.
Well, I can't drink in my own bar because I run it. So, so I wanted to have a beer for the end of the race, okay? Sue me. So And there were a couple guys that were watching the race, and the one guy said, "What are they giving Kyle Busch a trophy for? What's going on here?" And I said to this gentleman that as the regular season champion, they gave Martin Truex one last year, and when I said they started that last year, you just thought it was the most ridiculous thing in the world. He said, "What's that, like a participation trophy?" I'm like, "No." I said, "It's no different than, say, you win the AFC and you get to go to the Super Bowl, but if you don't win the Super Bowl, you're just the AFC champion." You know what I mean? So I think they try to, again, equate it with stick and ball sports, but I think the future will hold to see how significant it is to be the regular season champion, because the first guy went on to trump that with the Cup, but it'd be interesting.
I think the only significance it'll ever become is if you don't go on to win the...
Right.
We'll have to see how that plays out. You win this and win that, so...
It'd be an asterisk. Nobody will remember unless you look it up.
Exactly, yeah, so... Yeah. But anyway, so speaking of champions and championships, the IndyCar Championship will be decided this weekend. We've got Ford mathematically alive, go to the Astor Cup than the other two, but Scott Dixon, who has got a pretty decent path to his 5th championship. He'll be the first guy to win more than 4 championships. And Richard said, "There goes my link." So
I've been saving it. NASCAR to F1, it was a perfect link, but carry on.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, Richard, just because I like you, we'll revisit NASCAR for one moment and then switch to Formula One. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's just because you're my boy and I like you. So, but anyway, and then Ron has their chance at winning this championship. The 3rd and 4th place guys, Newgarden and Willpower, both are tied in points. So they've got the same championship scenario, which their championship clinching scenario pretty much involves Rossi and Dixon crashing into one another in the opening laps, and then they have to win. They both need to win and have Dixon and Rossi finish way down in the order. But Dixon's concerned, 2nd place clinches it for him. So that's, in itself, it's a bit of a tall order to say, go ahead and run out there and finish 2nd as competitive as the IndyCar field is. And you've got other guys out there who haven't had a win this year that are itching for one. And, maybe they're not worried about... like a Graham Rahal is not really too worried if it goes to Dixon or Rossi. So it's gonna play. It'll be the last finale at Sonoma for the time being, because the finale on next year's schedule moves to Laguna Seca, which is the side of the season ender in the kart series for a number of years before they moved it to Fontana. So, Richard, you've been on the IndyCar title battle. You've got any thoughts, any insights?
Yeah, no, I think it's Scott Dixon's to lose, as you said earlier. With the way he just sort of knuckles down and gets the job done, I really can't see any other any other set of circumstances. But the interesting thing is, again, we talked about it in almost like the Keselowski situation. The ability to take a car that's the fastest car in its day, and how many times has he qualified 15th or 16th and finished 3rd? That's what wins you championships, not necessarily, qualifying on pole and winning the race, because you're going to have bad weekends. It's the ability to go from like mid-pack, through to the podium, which he's done it countless times this year, never mind throughout his career.
Well, yeah, and even if you look at the last race in Portland, his day was almost over before it began, but he was smart enough to keep the ring and instead of just saying, "Oh well, I lost it," he was right there at the end of the day and finished ahead of Rossi and actually extended points lead instead of amazing. And
exactly. It's good to watch, and it's inspiring in a way to watch guys when they do that. They just plug away and they do the hard grind, and no, you've got to give credit to the guy, and talk about making the out of what you get, the hand you get dealt. He's certainly up there with those guys.
Yeah, and then of course every year around championship time, they start talking about Dixon and how he's just he's so low key, right? He doesn't really like to put himself out there. He doesn't like a lot of attention on himself, right? And he's just so low key. But if you just start to look at his accomplishments, he He just been slowly climbing up the win ladder. This year, he passed Michael Andretti, Michael Andretti was the winningest driver in the history of the kart series. The only guys ahead of him are a guy named Mario and a guy named AJ, and everyone's heard of them.
Yeah, yeah, they're not too shabby, are they?
Yeah. And so you figure, and how long have those guys been out of the sport? So Dixon's been the dominant driver, since the early 90s. Sure, he's been in it for a while. You think under 40, believe it or not. You've got guys that are older than him, and he's driving at the peak of his career.
Yep.
Still, whenever you think he's slowing down, he wins another championship.
Yep.
So Gray, you're back with us.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Richard and I just talked about Dixon a little bit. So let's have your comments on the other guy that's going for this championship, the much younger, newer, a more difficult path to the championship. He pretty much needs to win, and then have Dixon fall a bit farther back down the order. But if Dixon has a bad day, Rossi can miss with top 5 or top 6. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios that go on, but he definitely needs to finish a couple spots ahead of Dixon.
Well, I think when you talk about Rossi, you're talking about probably the hottest driver at or near the front in just every race he's run this year. He's been a little enthusiastic at times, but he's been the hardest charger to me of really anybody in the entire field. So yeah, his driving and the way his team has performed have positioned him with a good chance to win that championship. And I expect him to go out and dominate races like we've seen him do this year. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, Dixon knows what's ahead of him. Dixon needs to run his race, whether that's going to be a calculating race. Him and his team strategist go out and put a good car together, a good solid car together to keep him at or near the front. I think Rossi's knows what he has to do. He needs to try to lead as many laps and win the race.
And then to your point, Rossi's aggressive nature, this is, of course, the worst-case scenario, right? Rossi's aggressive nature, they both qualify up front, and Rossi has to get a little too aggressive, take them out. That could open the door for Newgarden and or Will Power to steal this thing, although it's highly, highly unlikely. But we've seen stranger things in racing. Like if you just back to 2015, Dixon's last title, you had Will Power and Juan Montoya running first and second in the championship, take one another out. That opened up the door for Dixon to steal that one. And then even if you look at the guy we're going to talk about a little later tonight in the show, Kimi Räikkönen, when he won his championship, he was the kind of the dark horse, needed everything to align right, and he was a champion at the end of the day, back when he won his. So anything that happens is going to be exciting. I've never felt that Sonoma was the ideal race for the season ender. I like the years they had him on ovals, but the fact that we're going back to Laguna, I always liked them at Laguna, but it'd be interesting to see how the new cars run there, and we'll find out in a year's.
Yeah, well, you got two different strat. You got aggression and versus consistency. And that's what it's going to be. Both guys know what they've got to do. I don't think, Dixon hasn't shown a tremendous amount of speed this year. He's been, like I said, that they've been consistent week in and week out, and have taken advantage of what they've been given. And he's parlayed that into a championship. Again, to me, if they had to pick a most popular driver of the year, Rossi's got to be the one, because he's been the star of the season in IndyCar.
Absolutely, yeah. But if you had to pick a most popular driver this year, I would say, because I want to talk about Robert Wickens a little bit. I mean, Robert Wickens, he came in and quickly captured the hearts of the IndyCar fans. People so quickly, and the team, about a week ago, there were a couple of reporters that were erroneously reporting news about his condition. So the team released a statement with a full list, and it's fairly extensive. I mean, it's not good. But the big thing is the spinal injury is still inconclusive. These things take time. But I think that it's so disappointing that this has happened. I think, when it comes to any most popular driver poll, he'll win it hands down because, Rossi has kind of divided. There are people that love Rossi and there are people that can't stand him. But it seemed like everybody has really warmed for Wickens really quickly. Not just for his ability on the track, but the guy personality-wise. I mean, he's every bit as charming as his good buddy James Hinchcliffe. And, and just like I said, I've never met a Canadian area. So still thinking about Robert and wishing him well. So with that being said, I want to leave some time to talk about Formula One. But let's pick a winner for Sonoma and a winner for the championship. And I'll start with you, Gray.
I'm going to say Rossi does what he has to do and claims the championship. Of course, this is going to be double points, right?
Yep, double points.
Yep, I'm going to say Rossi comes from behind, goes there, dominates the race, and wins the Astra Cup.
Okay, and Richard, how do you see this playing out?
I think Dixon's going to win the championship, and I think he goes easily.
Okay, all right. I've got a really different scenario in mind. And this is only because, and I ended up being in the top 10 in points, and whatever. I mean, this is just a really simple league. You just pick your winner week in and week out, and they compile your points. If the guy you pick wins, you get the maximum points. If the guy you finish second, you get second place points. But at the end of the year, in the top 10, right, gets to pick a driver to win, but everyone in the top 10 has to pick a different driver, and I picked late. So Rossi was gone, and Power was gone, and Newgarden was gone. So I went ahead and picked Zach Veach in the league. Because I could see, while these other guys are running for a championship, a guy coming out of the woodwork and winning the thing. So I'll say that Dixon wins the championship and Zach Veach surprises us by winning the race. Although the league, but Veach has been running well. So with that being said, I guess, Richard, we have to revisit NASCAR for just a second. So, and the only thing I want to say about NASCAR is, let's talk again about that Xfinity race real quick. Because that was very entertaining, and last year it was very entertaining at the Brickyard. So what are your thoughts as far as, are we going to get a very similar package for the Cup cars at the Brickyard? They have been looking for something to spice up that race, and the Xfinity guys are putting on a damn good show. I mean, is this like, hey, what do we need to do to get that on the Cup car?
That was the modified aero package again then at Indy, the same one as they ran last year, and similar to what the Cup cars ran at the All-Star race then, yeah?
That's it, yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it takes to get on the cars. I mean, my only concern is you've got to find that balance between turning, you've got to entertain, but you've also got to try and, not turn every race into a super speedway race. With pack racing, you've got to, there's a balance there they've got to play, I think.
Indianapolis is a super speedway.
Well, sorry, the Daytonas and Talladegas.
Yeah, but I don't think that.
I'll give you that.
I don't think that the Xfinity racing was similar to what you see at Daytona and Talladega, but I mean, the Cup race itself was pretty darn entertaining. I thought it was a good race, so anyway. But, so Richard, you have a segue to...
I only just saw this earlier, but everybody else out there has seen the Twitter back and forth between Jimmy Johnson and Fernando Alonso this evening.
No, I didn't.
No, I didn't, no.
So there's a video out. I'm going to plug motorsport.com for posting this. But it's basically a FaceTime video of Jimmy Johnson and Fernando Alonso going, backwards and forwards between each other. And Jimmy saying, I think you have spare time on your hands. There's some pretty good racing. You should come over here and try some of it out. And Fernando Alonso says, Jimmy, you should come over here and check out some of our stuff. And Jimmy said, you see, because NASCAR will be racing the weekend of Texas. But I didn't know if, there's a potential that, Jimmy would drive an F1 car at, Austin or something like that. It's quite an interesting little sort of, especially with, the strong rumours, obviously, of Fernando coming over here for IndyCar. I mean, is he coming over here to test the NASCAR?
I would imagine, Alonso's one of these guys that if it's got four wheels, he'll give it a whirl. I would imagine. I mean, he got a piece of sports car racing at Le Mans and Daytona earlier in the year. I think he's one of these guys that he'll try it, and I mean he'll with any trepidation. He goes in with excitement and looking forward to it. And I think he views it as a challenge and wants to see how he can stack up in those cars. I'll be surprised if we see him in a stock car somewhere down the road. For somebody just giving it a go, either in competition or in a testing.
Next week or this week?
I don't know.
Sometime in September, I'm pretty certain that the NASCAR guys are testing over in Vegas. But I think that would be too soon. But it was just an interesting little, thing for those two guys to, to sort of do something like that. I mean, I'm sure it's a marketing and PR thing. I'm sure they're not.
We saw Tony and
Hamilton.
Hamilton swap cars at the Glen years ago.
It was who else did it? It was Montoya and
Jeff Gordon years ago. Yep.
They did it at Indy. Yeah.
Yeah. There's giant pictures of that in the lunchroom at the media center at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They call it trade and paint, and it was Gordon Montoya. So, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Alonso hop in a stock car for a test because he said, "I love driving race cars and I'll drive anything with wheels." He's the guy's in a golf cart in a go kart in his off time. He loves karting. He's done well in He's going to win the WC Championship just because of the lack of entries at the top level there. So, not right.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean. Conspiracy theorist would be, well, is that why he hasn't signed up for IndyCar yet? Is he sniffing around the NASCAR drive for next year? Who knows?
I don't know.
I tell you,
because that's a lot of work. A lot of work. Goodness me! But we all know how media packed and how valuable the time of these, the drivers are, and especially guys like Alonso and Jimmy Johnson. All that if. Fernando's just going to jump in an Xfinity car to a couple of laps of the Roval at Charlotte or something, on an off week. It seems like there's a little bit more to it than just, hey, Fernando, how's it going? Jimmy here, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it'll start the old internet forums, I'm sure.
Well, certainly, we obviously know that his Formula One career is essentially coming to an over. And it leaves a lot of new avenues. I mean, he's still a relatively young man. The sky's the limit. I mean, he can pick and choose and pretty much do whatever he wants to do. And I can see him trying disciplines. I wouldn't be surprised to see him sit in a sprint car, on dirt and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Formula One, so the Ferrari news is now official. Charles Leclerc will be in the Ferrari. But Kimi Räikkönen going back to Sauber. Richard, I didn't see that coming. Did you?
I'd heard rumours of it over the last couple of months. There was a lot of chatter about it. And I think there's partly Ferrari sort of sweetening the deal a little bit and massaging that relationship between themselves and Sauber. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Ferrari is still paying Kimi's salary and sort of removing that from Sauber's payroll. But personally, I think it's a great move for Sauber. I think Kimi's an experienced driver. He'll give good feedback. He'll be giving good input, and there's no doubt. I'll be the first to hold hand up and say Sauber have been the surprise package of 2018. I think the way they've gone about their business and the way they've done what they've done throughout the year, goodness me, you look back in Australia, they were terrible. They weren't even in the same ball with the car. And, now look at them, they're consistently breaking into the top 10 in qualifying and, point scoring on a reasonably regular basis, or at least, knocking on the door. So you've got to give a huge amount of credit to those guys. And, it wasn't wasn't until a couple of years ago that they were going week to week, paycheck to paycheck to keep the doors open at that place. So for those guys, Kimi going over there, I think almost sort of legitimizes their position within the sport, make people sit about. And I really do genuinely hope that this is the start of a mini revival for the Sauber team, because when Peter Sauber sold them out to BMW, probably 10, 12 years ago now, it sort of didn't go how they wanted, and Peter Sauber worked really hard to save that team and to bring them back where they are. So he's got to take a huge amount of credit for doing that. But it is difficult, and you look at Sauber and Williams are probably two of the last true independent teams in Formula, and for them to be successful in the way they have been this year especially, you've got to give them a huge amount of credit. And I think it's great that Kimi's going to be there. It'll be interesting to see who's his teammate next year. I don't know if they've announced that yet, but good. I'm really, really excited about what could potentially go on there at Sauber.
Certainly. Now, but there's some other lower grade rumors, and sometimes I don't know how to grade the rumors that come out of Europe, because I don't, I can. When I read sources in the States, I know who I can trust and who I can't. But there's some other lower groups coming out of Europe that perhaps long-term Kimi is buying into the team as a part owner of Sauber. Have you heard any of this? And
that's certainly something I haven't heard. But I mean, looking at Kimi's personality, is that something he'd really want to do? I can imagine that the day he hangs up his helmet, he's finding the nearest bar and getting absolutely smashed. I can't see him
having the personality to be a team leader.
Somebody that sort of, what's the phrase, pushing the flesh and going to all the corporate meetings and, entertaining all the sponsors. I just can't see that in him. As I say, The only thing I can imagine Kimi doing when he retires involves a bottle of vodka. I really can't see him doing anything else.
Give vodka, Maybe he'll come over to the States and drive for Ed Carpenter. Drive to Fuzzy Vodka's car. But no, I just want to put that out there because I read that from, like I said, again, it was a low grade source. Because you've got some.
There's a huge number of things going on in Formula One, and I think of all the teams, probably Sauber, actually, with their links to Ferrari and Alfa Romeo, are probably the stronger back teams at the moment of these private teams, compared to the likes of Williams and, obviously Force India's now got their big injection of cash, but it's really Williams are the only team now who are looking for any, they're desperate for money, and obviously losing Lance Stroll for next year and the Stroll money, they could be in real trouble coming into 2019.
Since the 70s, and they had years where they were the up and coming. I remember Alan Jones winning the 3 races in 1979, and then winning the championship the next year. And this was the newer, smaller team in the grid, and they built that team into where they had some incredibly dominant seasons. And they were the car to beat for years, where you had to drive the car free. And they had you got Mansell, Prost, Senna, all dying to drive that Williams car. But where they're at now, it's sad to see them at the back of the grid, wondering where the next where the next paid drivers are going to come from that keep flow. It's actually quite sad.
It was an interesting article this week came out from the interview Claire and Paddy Lowe, basically saying that in 2014 when the hybrid era first came into Formula One, they sort of got blindsided a little bit by the dominance of the Mercedes engine that they had in their car, and it hid a number of areas of poor performance and underdevelopment within the car, and sort of they sort of lulled themselves into a false sense of security, thinking that the car's really good. Well, in fact, it was only the engine that made them look really good, and that they've sort of backed themselves into a little bit of a corner there, and maybe haven't put some of the resources when they're available into some of the areas that needed it. So hopefully they can find somebody that will come in. They will be smart about how they work. They'll get some investment. I mean, they've said that they're open for investment in the team, but the team's not for sale, which has always been the case. I mean, going back to the mid-2000s, as mentioned earlier, when Sauber bought BMW, BMW were very, very interested in buying Williams and rebranding them, but Frank quite stubbornly refused to sell the team. He was more than happy to have BMW as an engine partner, and there was certainly some success there in the early 2000s, but he was never going to sell to BMW, and right or wrongly, they found themselves in the position that they're in now.
Yeah, it's but teams come and teams go. I remember some of the other great constructor teams.
The Brabhams and guys like that. Lotus.
Brabham, Tyrrell, Lotus are the three that I remember fondly. Well, they all had great cars. They all had seasons of brilliance. They all had really great drivers come through. And they're all gone now.
Yep. Oh yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the upcoming race.
Yep.
So we're racing this coming Sunday, or we have another week off?
Yeah, this coming Sunday, Singapore night race.
Well, okay, so it'll be like in the States. It'll be at 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, roughly.
1 in the morning on Sunday morning. Yeah. The weather forecast is the same as last year. There's forecast for rain on race day. Actually, rain all weekend. So could see another intriguing race, and as it's been pretty much for the last half of this season, there's no point in picking a winner because it's completely random. It's if it's dry and everything goes according to plan, you'd have to put your money on the Red Bull and Ferrari being the quicker of the big three. But if it rains, you've seen that Mercedes car for some reason just works well in the rain. You look back at where were we? Hungaroring, before the summer break, and that is never a circuit that you'd expect Mercedes to do well at, similar to Singapore, but it rained in qualifying and Mercedes just hooked up and worked under those conditions, and Hamilton got on pole and there was nobody capable of passing him. So it all depends. I mean, if it does rain, it's a complete lottery. And it doesn't rain, something unpredictable is going to happen, as we saw last weekend and we've seen for the last few races. So, yeah, who knows what's going to happen? There's really no point in trying to predict it.
Yeah, you're right. There really is no point in trying to predict it, other than conventional wisdom and look at the season tells you whatever happens will fall Lewis Hamilton's way. Yeah. and Vettel will be disappointed.
But how good is that? How good is that to say about Formula One that we don't know what's going to happen?
Exactly right. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah,
great. It's for so many years it's been Formula One's so boring. Everybody knows who's going to win. Blah 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 blah. Now it's like we haven't got a clue who was going to win, and it's great. That's how it should be. Maybe they could make the racing better, but still, the outcome is so unpredictable. It's fantastic for the fans.
It is, yeah. So, and I'd be interested to see how the next season plays out as well. With the changes we have on board. So, now Gray, we've just got about a moment or two left. So, you can make a pick for the Formula One race, although Richard says it's meaningless, or you can just share a final thought with the group before we sign off.
Well,
or you can do both.
I'd like to see Vettel win it and tighten up the championship and see what happens there. So I'm going to pick Vettel, but looking forward to the first stage of the NASCAR playoffs, going out to Vegas. Looking forward to see who wins and see if we see any trends or new trends start, or same old thing we've seen all year. If the big three can continue their dominance, so we'll just have to tune in on Sunday.
All right. Now, Richard, I'll give you one final thought. You can pick a Formula winner or not. You don't have to, since you yourself said it's pointless. So, or you can just have a final thought.
I mean, for the hell of it, I'm going to pick Verstappen.
Sure, why not?
And as a final thought, I know we don't really often cover it on this show, very rarely in fact, but I don't know if any of you out there caught what happened at the MotoGP race last weekend in Italy, in Misano. But there was a Moto2 rider. So Moto2 is like the Xfinity series and the Formula 2 series.
Where the guy had the other guy's handle?
He didn't just grab his handle, he grabbed the other guy's brake lever.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
yeah.
Romano Fenati at 130-something miles an hour leaned over and grabbed the brake lever of one of his competitors. Thankfully, he's been banned for 2 races, but the team he races for has cancelled his contract for the next 2 seasons. And I mean, it's just, these days you talk about safety and you look at all the levels that Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR go to improve safety, and the MotoGP racing as well. I mean, inherently motorbike racing is far more dangerous than open wheel and tin top racing. But he's, it's just, you could almost be charged criminally for assault.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That was deliberate. I mean, that was a deliberate act to do it. I mean, he was going to pass the guy anyway because he'd already, used the slipstream to draft up beside him and was going to, take him in the next corner. But geez, he went up there and just. I mean, it was all the video I see. It just shows him grab the brake pedal, and you see the guy it has his brakes applied gets real light in the rear, and he gets his bike under control, and then the guy just turns around and looks at him, and just then the video ends. I'd like to see the completion of the pass.
Yeah, it's just mind blowing. It really is. As I say, it's the two people work so hard. I mean, it was only, I'm going to say, was it last year or the year before where there was a fatality in Moto2 in the MotoGP series. So, these guys are all well aware of the risks, and I mean, you hardly go a race weekend without one of these guys breaking a collarbone or an arm or a leg, in that series. So, I mean, it just defies belief.
You just got to file that under. What were you thinking?
It just shows an enormous amount of disrespect for your fellow competitors. I mean, that's
and the sport as a whole.
Right. That's just it's no room for that. They need to just kick him out of it and once and for all.
Yep. All right. Well, we are up against the clock. We're out of time. We're actually in a green-white checker now, so I won't make a pick for Formula One because it's meaningless. So, although I wouldn't mind seeing Kimi win one for Ferrari before he sails off to Sauber. But my final thought that really looking forward to the IndyCar season finale, and as always, I'm really going to be sad then that our IndyCar season is over when there's so many great weeks of racing ahead. I don't mind the compressed schedule. I hate that we end early, but I think it's been a great IndyCar season. And 2019 is looking very bright. Was reading an article about from Autosport.com, I believe, about the for new cars for next year, and Dallara, who produces the cars, and they said they've got a lot of orders for next year. So we may be looking at 28 cars on the grid week in and week out in IndyCar, and that's a fantastic sign.
We need about 24. We need about 24 races.
Yes.
Need about 6 more added to the season. We're losing. Let's see, we're losing what, Sonoma next year? But we're
picking up Laguna. Yeah, it's still 17 next year, so.
Getting Laguna and Coda. Where else will they lose?
Phoenix.
Oh, yes.
Yep. Yeah, Coda's replacing Phoenix and Laguna's replacing Sonoma. But
the good thing about the IndyCar schedule, they could still add races even at this late date.
Sure, well, it's not really that late if you think about how long the off season is. So yeah, they can. They still keep talking like they want to do a couple of international races early in the season. But guys, we're overtime. So Richard, Greg, I want to thank both of you guys. Great show tonight. I want to thank Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank all you folks that tune in and listen to us every week. And till next week, enjoy the races. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.